Yes, I would say one's self-preservation does kick in their consideration for a choice of profession. Uh, on you mentioning the uh, rise of people who would say, be exactly whatever you want to be, I think that is very much tempered with the inclusion, even though it might not be directly spoken, it is heavily implied that you must choose a profession which actually can support you, in addition to, hey, choose something that's actually enjoyable for you. And I think that's a very laudable sort of uh, philosophy, and that's in fact why I'm doing what I'm doing now. On speaking with you, and then I'll be editing and rendering and uploading this to YouTube. Uh, I think it's very necessary for people to do something they enjoy, and hopefully in time this will become a career of mine. Now, as for uh, the demand of fields which you were mentioning, not only is it something that could be morally within the realm of a person, I think it's also economically something which could very much benefit them. Of course, if you've got a low supply but high demand field, which is unending as far as its necessity, as far as we can foresee as a species, uh, you're going to get paid more in general. If you're going to be a nuclear physicist, there's not that many people to fill that role. However, there is an increasing supply, so you'll probably be paid more. Um,
And the reason physicism and physicists get paid so much, right? The reason physicism industries or any, scientific research centers get funded is because they are contributing directly. Now, the thing is that they're sometimes not funded by taxes, and so people who work give taxes because that's sometimes a legal requirement. A lot of the time it is. And in a lot of countries, that is the case. And so when people work, when they pay taxes, it goes around and it contributes to everyone. The people who are homeless aren't paying taxes. And so nobody's reaping the benefits of that, are they? Wouldn't that kind of
well,
collapse
no,
everything?
but they also aren't. They also aren't really getting any of the benefits of that
Yeah,
either.
no, that's why people should work, though.
You. I agree, and I think that's something that should be very much promoted, and in fact is in most societies. However, they really aren't reaping any benefits either. They really aren't getting anything unless you would count, say, roads and hospitals, streams, irrigation, uh, any of the bare essentials that are simply existent that aren't immediately administered on a short time scale and are very permanent. I suppose you could say they could benefit from that, but they aren't really getting any sort of immediate uh, gain from the tax system. Neither are they contributing to it, unless they were to say get a fiver from someone off the street and then go pay for some top ramen. They would still be paying taxes then, so I assume, or rather, they would still be contributing to an extremely minor degree, at least in that regard. But I don't think anybody is rooting for people to be homeless. I think it's simply uh, a side effect of a society in which is consumeristic and capitalistic, and and in fact any sort of society in which work is necessary, which is all, there will be homeless people, and I think there should be a great deal of programs to get them out of such a state.
You're helping them, but I believe they should be able to help themselves if they are truly capable as adults or even teenagers who can get certain jobs. I believe that it's always nice to recommend them the jobs to show them the light of when they can get these jobs, but if we're talking about rehab or things like that, what happens is that taxpayers literally pay for homeless people to get rehabs in certain states, of which the homeless people are like they're getting the rehabs without actually contributing anything whatsoever to the economy or taxes to begin with. So they don't even pay taxes, right? And so they're getting basically just people bringing them up, teach them about stuff. Maybe they're even taking them to college because they didn't get a degree. And see, this is what I mean by where taxation goes. About helping the wrong kind of people. Sometimes it's necessary, but a lot of the times it's just not. And overall, I don't believe it is. If we are to get people to do anything in society, it's more or less they have to make that change. For instance, if I started demanding everything from, say, an industry I really liked, without saying, you're going to get something back in return, if I'm not even going to buy anything from that industry, they best off not cater to my needs. And so basically, the same with homeless people. If they're not going to work, then they shouldn't have to be expecting something back in return, which is people helping them alongside the journey to getting back on their feet. Because some of them do have drug problems, but who decided to do drugs? Who decided to not work? Who decided to um, get a mental? Well, you can't get a mental illness by choice, but you can get some physical illnesses by choice by living a degenerate life.
Oftentimes, there are quite a few physical ailments that simply aren't by choice. And back to what you were saying about the pull themselves up by their bootstraps mentality. I would agree. They do, in fact, need to contribute if they are going to take from society by, say, getting something like rehab administered to them. And that's why most programs, I should say, uh, are in fact in place for that sake, so that they can contribute to society down the line. If they have some sort of addiction or some sort of illness which is preventing them from leaving their state as someone who is homeless, uh, that's what that's there for. It's a utility to provide incentive for them to return to society and continue to contribute. Now, we could supplement this in a way by, in addition to the treatment that is administered, providing them avenues, which are a requirement if they wish to participate in these programs, to sign up for work at some place while still providing them the treatment. And whenever they happen to finish or be in a state stable enough to allow them to exist in these environments and contribute, then they will do so. Basically, a rehab for work program is what I'm pointing towards.
Sounds like people would exploit it though, because people would intentionally become homeless just so they can get this kind of special treatment. And so when they do get this kind of special treatment, they'll kind of weigh it out and they'll kind of be homeless just until people get tired of them. And then basically they'll just exploit the system. And so you're giving people all this extra special treatment for doing less work overall. I mean, it's literally the opposite of promoting healthy habits.
I don't think anybody would choose to be homeless unless they were on the far fringes of some sort of mental, damn near personality disorder. So, in any event, they would more than likely be a net negative anyhow, without any sort of mental treatment.
Well, some, but others.
Uh, Even if there were some sort of population to do this, they would still be an extremely small percentile and would eventually weed themselves out by um, de facto uh, uh, social Darwinism in action.
Yeah, I would support the idea of social Darwinism, but that's always a key for me. I do believe that.
Well, social Darwinism isn't something you can support or deny. I mean, you can promote it, but it's simply an existent law. The things that survive better in a meritocratic society, as most capitalistic nations are, even if they happen to include socialistic principles and legislation and programs, will still require or will still have this law in effect. The things that succeed will succeed, and the less superior, more inferior actions and inactions of people will fail and eventually weed themselves out simply because it doesn't work.
If something works as a system, obviously the government are going to put it to best of use. But social dominalism is basically favoring people who are superior on any chain, whatever that may be. And so people who make more money are obviously superior to the government and obviously deserve better treatment. Because if we're giving special treatment or we're giving kind of this kind of it's a bit like foreign aid or something like that to people who are homeless, once again, there's going to be those who decide to exploit the system directly because they know this is going to benefit them. In an old-fashioned society, there will be no such thing because we wouldn't take chances like that. In fact, in an old society, one that is strict and one that actually has consistent laws, we enforce them, that's the key word, to be a specific way. Not necessarily for police them or anything,
You're
but
starting to
to
break
get.
up. Sorry, you're starting to break up.
Okay. Is it better now?
Uh, you're still getting a little bit of it. All right. Well, where were you in the conversation?
Well,
Because I kind of lost my train of thought.
I was referring to the fact that in a society that values people's work, that values people's money, obviously people exploit this kind of just any chance you'll give them, right? They'll exploit it because a long time ago when laws were more strict, it was just you have to live this certain way, and anybody that goes against that, well, it's either they're rebellious or they're just special in the sense that they're special because they're living something unusual. The people living different lifestyles at this point in time has just become normalized. It's become strangely ingrained. Like, oh, hey, this person is definitely living well, he's living a very adventurous life. Back in the day, it was called an odd life or just an unhealthy life because people who buy things from stores, people who live in everyday Western civilization and purchase things, they're contributing one way or another to kind of the circle of giving. People sell things, people manufacture things, people carve things, create things. It's all over the place.
Sure. But of course, if you give no leeway or absolutely minimal for the society you happen to uh, look at, then you're going to damn a great majority of the people who would otherwise work. A lot of these programs, as far as I know, have quite a fair success rate among people such as the homeless or those otherwise incapable of working. So long as there's the prevailing system where you will be able to consume and purchase products for an income, uh, there will certainly not be any sort of majority or even near to a majority of people who would choose to use some sort of government program just to uh, have something slightly less intensive. The amount of effort you would have to go through for to get these benefits isn't worth it at all. And that's in fact one of the reasons there is a stigma and um, a strong emphasis on uh, well doing the opposite of being an unproductive slob.
I do believe that the process of obtaining normal citizenship, the process of getting a job, I think people try to emphasize it in the way that it's exaggerated the difficulty of doing these things. And so it kind of appeals to the homeless demographic, although I don't really like to call them a demographic for obvious reasons. It contributes to people who, well, they're not bad people necessarily, but they're not people who are worthy of just living within a society that is looking out for them. Obviously, if you're going to get things in return, for instance, people giving you rehab or giving you some kind of aid when you're down, you should actually be able to fulfill the favor. You know, get a job, be a decent human being, that kind of stuff. And so, mainly people who are poor are refugees and immigrants, and they don't work much at all. And this is the problem. So you take them in, and they don't contribute really anything to the society. Really, what people are looking forward to now, what people are kind of pointing their finger at, is that, oh, it's about morality. And, this is where it gets a bit more subjective when it comes to, is it morally right to just deny these people the help they apparently need? That's what people are really getting at when they talk about these kinds of issues, really.
Well, that may be the case that it has become more of a moralistic question. Uh, I would vie more towards the conclusive argument that in fact having these programs does provide more means and incentive for someone who is destitute uh, out of uh, coincidence, out of necessity of of the course of their life, uh, will generally assist them getting back on their feet and actually providing some work and some production.
Well, I'll give you an example, and this is
Uh,
something that people commonly use. Back in the old days, when a kid would get really bad grades, it was entirely the kid's fault. But now, apparently, the parents who kind of, well, not school, but how do we say, leave an impression upon their kids, apparently it's their fault now. And they say this because they're literally implying and giving it away. The parents have a lot of influence over their children. So, what exactly do parents do to influence their children to not have a job? Since when was I'm not going to have a job when asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up in life? A valid answer. Because if it is,
uh,
then it's going to become a problem.
well, that's why it's usually followed up with a push towards finding some sort of answer. Uh, Now, what you were saying about the blame of children not working towards academic success, I would say there's a large case by case basis on this. There are a lot of incompetent parents. There are a lot of incompetent children. There are a lot of incompetent schools and or scholastic environments, both in primary and post secondary education, unfortunately. There are a lot of things that can determine the outcome and, in fact, influence it towards a very negative conclusion. Uh, I would say this isn't really a question of just their lack of motivation towards producing something for society. I would say it's the lack of structure that promotes a positive uh, outcome for these questions and these eventual happenings whenever the children uh, in question grow up and are supposed to take the mantle of their uh, uh, being the head of household for themselves and providing a living.
Maybe. Although,
I, at least over here in the United States, I can say absolutely.
okay, well, The thing is that we're giving the government this chance to intervene when it's not really their business. When you raise a child, you're obviously supposed to teach them good morals and how to behave and how to. Actually, I think you can blame schools for not giving children enough information on how to get a job. They teach you relevant things, so I think this might be more of an education argument, really, because, obviously I criticize my school for teaching us nonsense and propaganda and nothing, but it could just be summed up by, oh, we don't want people working in the working class. Perhaps schools have an agenda, and perhaps that is in relation to the economy dying off. I mean, it sounds like a stretch, probably, yeah. But to some extent, you can still, at the very least, blame it on schools that they're not teaching specific important things that will be reliable when it comes to education. Obviously, I want my children to be taught how to get a job. And if I were a parent, I would just demonstrate because parents don't do that to their kids. Which is a shame because, I don't know, maybe these individual parents don't have jobs themselves. Maybe they do.
Uh, I would say that it is, like I was mentioning before, a culmination of a great deal of factors, both environmental, as in the happenings around the children, as well as internal, and obviously the external influences their internal monologue and a continuum of thought and philosophy, which will develop over time, and of course, thereby their character. Um, I I highly would doubt that the schools have a particular agenda to keep their what would be previous students from succeeding in this way. But I would say that it is that the focus has been shifted to uh, far more academic than practical skill sets, and they don't even teach it effectively. Uh, you can see it in everything from the most prodigious private school to the most destitute public school. Uh, Most of the core content isn't related to life skills like financial management and education on working law or labor laws or anything of the sort. It's mostly aimed towards your academic skills like literature and mathematics and social studies and things of that sort, which I think are absolutely important and necessary and should be taught in schools. However, they shouldn't eclipse entirely, uh, and oftentimes in a manner that is extremely poorly implemented in their actual teaching, um, actual applicable uh, utilitarian practical skills such as the ones I mentioned previous, in addition to a great deal of other practical utilitarian skills. We are at a severe shortage of knowledge, at least in my generation, I can certainly say, uh, for life skills in general. In fact, it's widely, or it was widely said throughout my school that uh, this high school and there have been accounts from others just in the similar area and even across the country. They don't prepare you for college. They don't prepare you for life. It became a running gag, in fact.
None of it prepares you.
So I think from sorry
I was
what
just saying none of it prepares you in that sense because you can. I think it's maybe based upon parenting probably at this point because that was the argument I was talking about before.
well well there's parenting and education and everything from the ground up really. education has a large impact on the people who will come out of it and thereby create the next generation of educators and teachers. And I don't mean just in the educational sense. I mean in the informal sense as well. From the ground up, we have just seen at least I can say from my perspective, degradation of practical knowledge that would assist people in the modern world.
I do believe that even with this education, even with this knowledge and wisdom, about how people put it to use. For instance, it's about each to their own, really. Can I research more than my classmates? And is that relevant? Because when you talk about work, kids just get bored. Teenagers get really bored. They just don't care enough because they never see themselves doing it. But then it actually happens, and oh no, they're swept up in it.
No, I think very much they do see
No,
themselves
most
doing
of them
it
don't. Most
out
of
of
them don't. Most of
necessity.
them will say, "I
No,
don't." You know what? Let's talk about this later or something. I just put it off, and then I'll just never get around to it. Really.
sure, and they very well may, but they will eventually be doing it, and that's the issue. There's no passion, there's no life, there's no inspiration in a lot of the fields that are open to the public. Even if you take a college course, and you happen to be assured, I will be able to find a role in this or this field. It's mostly concerned about the income of that they'll bring in, not of their care for the work, not of their passion for the work. And so long as there's no passion, um, impassioning professions to bring to these young uh, employees, and in fact, perhaps some employee or future employers, you will continue to find this. So long as there's nothing to be interesting, it won't be an interest.
That's the thing with how this conversation is going. You're more concerned about the individuals who work. I'm more concerned about the work they do. Because when we concern about them, we're not concerned about the world itself, the world around us. And this is just like the argument of recycling or not disposing of garbage wrongly. We don't like doing it, but we should still do it to help the world. We need to we need to recycle. We need to reuse things. It's a bit like that. And so I see more interested in the individual happiness of these people. Sometimes people do jobs that they don't always like, but there's a standard. There's a standard that they set for themselves. If they partake in a job they don't like, that's completely their choice because they're the ones choosing with their equality of opportunity. You know what they can do? They can get literally any job, but it's about how good they are or what opportunities are available. And it's true. Sometimes fortune happens to those who aren't very good. Many examples of this in celebrities. But the thing is, a lot of the time when it comes to getting basic jobs, so basic jobs that aren't too painful to get through and have decent wages, we shouldn't be concerned about them. They have decent tongue tied. They have decent wages. They have decent hours. They have a family to sometimes go home to if they still live with their parents. They might move out. They might get an apartment, a house, maybe start a family. And so people who reject marriage, people who like to label themselves of these identity politics to get out of things, people like to say, "Oh, I'm a communist" or "I'm an anarchist" to try and derail the conversation. So it makes them not look lazy, despite the fact that it really does. The truth is that you shouldn't be pandering to people who have the opportunity to do something. I think it's fine if they're not completely 100% happy with their jobs. But I don't think it's fine either to put them in like horrible human right violating situations either. I'm just saying there's always an extent to these kinds of things.
Of course, there must be a balance, but that's the thing. Even in professions of which there are high demand and high supply, which is generally what someone who is starting out, and oftentimes, at least in the modern market will be stuck in out of necessity. Uh, they don't necessarily violate human rights, but they also aren't inspiring. They're highly physically and emotionally draining. They aren't. Uh, they're just pipe works. They funnel you in and then they funnel you out once they've had their fill of you. And that's what a lot of people are finding as what they can look forward to as an entry level job. There's just not much to inspire. And on the topic of jobs that are necessary and important, but also perhaps aren't the easiest, I think those need to be put in the forefront of the spotlight. You'll often see just people looking for something such as being a doctor or being a lawyer or some other uh, stereotype. Um, but really, we need to expand the field of what people are seeing to jobs where they can actually benefit the world over, such as in environmental scientists and very, very specialized fields of medicine, beyond just the basic nurses and doctors and that sort of thing, uh, into the realm of something, say, environmental marine
Oh
biologists.
yes, yes.
These very narrowly filled fields that have extreme demand but very little supply. We need to look into this. We need to promote them, and we need to offer more incentive for people to go into these
I
sorts
know,
of
but
things. But we also have to have an environment that creates the interest.
you can't.
Whenever your interest is just survive and try and make the best of your life, as it is in a lot of the world, you aren't going to find people going out of their way to do that en masse.
Just such a problem here though, because millennials, you're gonna teach them about marine biology. You're gonna teach them about all these different social studies, academic courses. I think the vast majority of them aren't going into them, and I think the ones who are going into them or believe they're going into them, once they start going into them, they just have no idea what they've gotten into. There's no courses to begin before you actually begin. There's no trial thing. They might take you to university, but they won't be able to even make it to university. And I say this in such a concern because I've worked with, not worked, but I've talked with teenagers. All right, God damn. It's just hard in this generation because discipline, I think the word is. They were more harsh on children back
I
in the
would
old
agree.
days. I'm not talking about corporal punishment. I mean talking about getting them to live up to standards. Those standards have
I
just
know
gone.
exactly what you
It's
mean.
like, oh, you can't have your children live up to standards. That's cruel. Well, it's not that cruel if it's just be aware. Research things before you go into them.
I absolutely agree with you on this. And in fact, that's one of the points of a policy that I am very much in favor of, that I'll bring up after I um, reinforce. In addition to instilling discipline in our posterity, we also absolutely, without a doubt, need to create more interest in these fields, these understaffed, overworked fields, which will provide you a very, very stable, very, very comfortable living, but will also contribute to the world at large. Those are extremely important fields that need to be filled that simply aren't. And that brings me to my next point on the subject of discipline. That is one of the very reasons of which I just discipline in general and the wealth of benefits that it will yield is a mandatory stateside military training and service. Uh, Compulsory military service stateside. for at least a sum of, I would say, maybe 2 or 3 years. And of course, voluntary um, out of country service for people who wish to participate in that. I think that would absolutely instill a massive amount of discipline as well as teach a gratuitous amount of life skills, basic mechanics, um, basic medical knowledge, um, basic leadership and uh, team cooperation. It instills and injects this policy would a titanic amount of benefits for what is effectively no cost beyond the monetary financial um, um, value to actually implement this, which would pay off in dividends as an investment further down the line.
I do believe that teaching kids about economics, investments, banking, these kinds of jobs and opportunities, I think that is really what's going to set the goal for them because they'll have more understanding of it. And to get numbers and statistics in your head, it's good to kind of research these things beforehand. Yeah, sure, we can take a look at foreign policies, getting more people from different countries to begin working, people of older ages, I'm presuming. But what you gotta understand, Xilver, is that people of different ethnicities, they work different hours, generally speaking, okay? For instance, Asians work more than Europeans, and below that we have Hispanics who work less than Europeans. But beneath that we have blacks and Aboriginals who work the least. More specifically, Aboriginals work the least out of just any nationality or race. It's just altogether. And so when we compare different countries, right, that are compiled of specific demographics in terms of racial demographics, when we take a look at how much people work in Asia, right, we obviously want to work up to that level. We want Europe and the West to work up to the level of what, how much time Asians are working there, and so that kind of be like a
Uh,
gold standard to kind of start with.
I really quite disagree with that. A lot of the work over in Asia is simply because that's what it takes to survive. That's the bare minimum of what it takes to
You all
live.
aware that there?
I
Oh
look
no, you
forward.
you talk.
Sorry, I look forward to a very very technical sort of economy. Whenever the sweeping wave of automation hits first world countries like the U.S., Australia, the United Kingdoms, and some of the not currently fucked parts of Europe uh, and Asia, uh, where there will be a mass amount of unemployment in some of the lower fields, but an extremely uh, uh, strong movement towards very technical fields such as computer science, mechanical engineering, um, fields in which are currently not nearly as populated as they will be post workism, I believe is the term that has been coined for this effect that we'll be seeing. I am in favor of a comfortable living at the rate the rate of no more than 40 hours work week. That will allow us for uh, a significant cultural boom as well as a very specialized workforce boom. While all of our more mundane, more simplistic, more rudimentary, sorry, um, professions will simply be weeded out as a matter of course. I absolutely see the addition of more work to that, unless it is absolutely necessary. Say there's some sort of time of war, or we are facing some great uh, calamity that is on the horizon as unnecessary. We should allow the workers to have a fair balance of personal uh, time to pursue whatever non uh, productive or even personally fulfilling and productive uh, avenues that they wish to, in addition to providing a fair deal of productivity to the market and economy. I don't see productivity as a whole as a hallmark of uh, a working society, as you've seen with nations that have been communistic in the past, or even totalitarian and authoritarian, like say North Korea, Vietnam, places like that. Um, they produce a great amount of productivity, and yet the quality of living and the overall status of their nations are shit in comparison to first world Western countries. I think you may have the concept that productivity equals success very well instilled within you, and I by principle and with historical backing would disagree with that.
Okay, but
Not not necessarily because it's the work, but also because of the quality of living.
the video game about the quality of living, you're once again looking at this from, I mean, you're looking at this from the angle of the person. The working class, the working person, on average, as you said, 40 hours a week. Now, this is something to begin with. 8 hours, 5 days. I understand this is basically the routine that most Western countries follow. But if we take a look at Asia, how much they work, even outside of cities, when we talk about farms and working in a community, there is a community there. It may not be backed by capitalism, it may not be backed by giant towers, corporations, and businesses and industries and all that kind of stuff. Every company put together that has franchises. But in these little farms, there are communities in these little fields, a bit like Vietnam as well. There are people working there, people farming there, people living with the sky above their heads. And they're happy doing that. In fact, they get to live with the community, they get to live with many other people who share values. And that's the thing with Japan and Vietnam. They have this thing going for them in which people can live very happily doing the work and also do lots of work, and therefore contribute to the economy of their little community as long as it's within a certain amount of miles. So in this case, the farms, the patches, the endless amount of farms and patches, in fact, it's basically, well, it's the most amazing thing if you go to Vietnam or Japan, and if you go outside the big city areas, you'll find these places. And people live very humble lives there. And so I think if society, our society, can work towards something like that in a way, work towards something like that, I think it'll be best for everybody because we get both what we want and what we need, but what the society we live in needs and what our country and nation needs, because that is helping people. That is within itself making money, but also being quite selfless in the process. So the thing is, if we are to put taxation on the poor, this will encourage people not to be poor. More people will become rich because they'll be working more. More people will find better jobs because, well, since I'm working this much, I best off finding a career, an opportunity for me that seems to be of my best interest. Because if there are jobs out there and we create more jobs and we have heaps of jobs available for everybody, and no jobs and industries are maxed out, then everybody gets what they want. And society grows and therefore makes more productivity, makes more products in general, makes more, well, pretty much everything. Industries are blooming and everybody is getting, well, super successful through this process. And so I look at Japan and I think, well, this is very good. This is what we should be aiming at. Not something like Africa where there's hardly any government. They don't have a giant. They don't have a real government for the entire continent. They have governments for cities, sure, but that's kind of the extent. Even then, within the city itself, that's just a city. It's not even in the individual countries of Africa, which is spanning the continent altogether. Really, it's kind of scarce how you define African governments. So we have more strict authoritarian governments, and we have the idea of taxation aimed at the poor to some extent, and we kind of reward rich people for being rich because that's what we want in society. Will eventually become successful in all categories and all manners, and people will enjoy doing these jobs. I think that's what I want to work towards. I think that's something most people would agree that to some extent or another, that's going to improve overall life for everyone. And you'll give the money to your children. When you have children, while people be getting married, some of that money will go to your children anyway. And so they'll start off with more money. And therefore, you see what I'm going here. There's going to be kind of like the staggering of money for next generations to come.
I see. Well, I think we've reached sort of an impasse here, and I think you very much summed up your conclusive vision for the state of an ideal nation in regards to at least their economic standings and the byproducts thereof. So I think I'll cap it off with mine. My vision in this particular field is for a nation which is vastly automated, so that there will be very few mundane, basic, unskilled jobs that will be available to the people, and thereby an increase and boom in fields which are more technical and specialized and reliant upon personal knowledge and skill, so that the people may benefit from this sort of advancement in technology and society, that they may have more time to themselves in addition to their works, their labors, yielding of a very comfortable, very high quality of life existence, um, without the damnation of the nation's economy.
See, you're coming into this with the perspective that the economy is responsible for the bad actions of bad apples. If somebody doesn't follow the curve or decides to go off rails, then that is their own priority.